Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
Welcome to Getting to Know You. I'm Zina Shevchik. We have with us today Debra Schramek, Deputy Director of the Albany County Crime Victim and Sexual Violence Center. Welcome, Debra.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Why don't you tell us about the history and services that your agency provides?
Okay. We are a comprehensive crime victims assistance program located in downtown Albany. We are available to provide assistance, counseling, financial help to victims of crime where either the victim resides in Albany County or their crime happened in Albany County. We were started in 1974 as an all-volunteer program. Around the same time that the women's movement was really coming on and sort of a feed-off from the civil rights movement, when people began to look at what was happening to women as rape victims, women who were going to court and not being treated fairly, having to go through extraordinary lengths to prove that they had been raped. And so this group of women called AWARE, Albany Women Against Rape, began this program with a hotline, 24-hour hotline, and they mostly provided medical accompaniment to emergency rooms and police accompaniment, some court work. The following year, the then newly elected district attorney petitioned the Albany County Legislature to take on our program as a department of Albany County, and that was approved. And so in 1975, our department became an independent department of Albany County government. Over the years, we've been able to grow. We started out as just a very small rape crisis center, running a hotline and doing police and medical and court accompaniments. But as more and more federal dollars became available, we were able to expand. We added an educator in the mid-'80s. And we developed our crime victims program in 1989. And we've grown by leaps and bounds since then. Unfortunately, it's because crime has grown by leaps and bounds, and we've had to keep up. Currently, we have 14 employees. We have 4 who are therapists on our staff, and we also have a clinical supervisor. We have 3 court advocates and a supervising caseworker who are in the courts. We have an educator who does all kinds of educational programs. We also have many, many volunteers who really help us run the 24-hour hotline and make sure we have coverage in all the courts in Albany County.
You started out as a rape crisis hotline.
Yes.
So now your title reads Sexual Violence Center.
Mm-hmm.
So does it include other things than rape?
Yes. When the centers were first started in the 70s, rape was the big issue. And we've been able to, as we've worked with other kinds of clients, we've seen that we can't just offer services to rape victims. We know that men are victims. We know that young children are sexually molested. Sexual harassment is another area that we cover. So we did broaden it, and we decided on the more inclusive sexual violence term rather than rape.
Good. Thank you for that explanation. Can you tell me a little bit more about how people connect to your agency, people who are in need, crime victims, victims of sexual violence, how do they connect to your agency?
Do you want to know how they find us?
Yes.
Yes.
Right.
Many of them are referred to us either by the hospital, the police, or the courts. So we do get a lot of referrals. Private therapists may refer people to us if they don't do the specialized trauma counseling that's required to work with victims of crime. We're in the phone book under rape are for rape, and also Albany County. And we try to get our publicity out as much as possible. We have our brochures. We drop them off at the area libraries and other places where we can think of that the public might pick them up.
So what you mean then is that those agencies and groups will tell victims about the existence of your service.
Yes.
So it's not that they give you the people's names, it's that they tell the victims to contact you.
Yes.
Is it the 24-hour hotline that people directly contact you, or do they usually call the administrative office?
Well, we have a 24-hour hotline, and let me put a plug in for the number, 447-7716. That is advertised as a sexual assault hotline. Although some crime victims will use it, they'll be directed to call our office during our office hours, which are Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 5 p.m. And the office number, we have two office numbers. To reach the therapy office or the administrative offices, you would call 447-7100. To reach the court advocate program, you would call 447-5500.
And we will, just so the audience knows, that we will put those numbers up on the screen at the end of our program.
That's
so
terrific.
that they'll have another chance if they didn't get those numbers right away.
All right.
Could you talk a little bit about the court advocates and
Yes.
their background and what they do?
Okay. We have caseworkers who are trained in the law. They're familiar with the court process. We have ties with the district attorney's office and with the various police departments. If we are contacted by a victim who says, I have to go to court tomorrow and I have no idea what to expect, we can provide information to that person. Depending on what court they're going to, we can make sure that either one of our advocates are there, or we share some of the courts with Equinox, which is the domestic violence program in Albany County. So we make sure that there'll be an advocate at that courtroom. And we'll be explaining what their role is, not only as a victim, but they were the witness to the crime. And as such, they'll be giving testimony as to what they observed and what they experienced. We also can talk to the district attorney on their behalf, particularly if they're a little bit shy or nervous about talking to the district attorney. We can assist with that. And we can also inquire of our clients whether or not they suffered any money loss because of a crime. For example, someone who doesn't have health insurance but went to the emergency room because they were raped or because they were assaulted and maybe had to get stitches. There is a New York State agency, the New York State Crime Victims Board, that we work very closely with. They will reimburse victims of crime who've made a police report for any expenses they've had within reason. They'll pay for the medical bill and any follow-up medical appointments that might be needed, medications that might be needed. If some vital piece of equipment was damaged because of the crime, for example, someone's wheelchair was stolen or someone's eyeglasses were broken, we can assist them in applying for reimbursement if they have to purchase a new one. Or if they don't have the money up front, we can do an emergency claim to the Crime Victims Board and have the Crime Victims Board pay for that equipment.
Great.
Okay.
Can you talk a little bit, if there are any differences between your members attending court with victims and their accompaniment of victims to the hospital?
Yes. There is a difference,
Yes.
yes. At this point, because we don't have enough staff or volunteers, we are only accompanying rape victims to the emergency room. Victims of sexual assault, particularly rape or sodomy, need to go to an emergency room to have medical evidence collected, which will strengthen their case if an arrest occurs and they're going to go to court. If they go to an emergency room, any of the three that are in Albany County, automatically we will be called by the hospital, and we will go be with the victim as they go through this medical exam. We're going to be talking about some health concerns that they might need to think about because of the rape, including, unfortunately, HIV. We'll be talking about what some of their options are, medications that they could take to help prevent HIV, to help prevent a pregnancy, eliminate any sexually transmitted diseases. That's the main part. That's the main reason someone would go to an emergency room. But in addition, they're going to have a medical exam that's going to involve examining their whole body for cuts, bruises, stray hairs, bite marks. An internal exam will be done. And all of that, whatever's collected, is going to be put into a kit called the Sexual Assault Evidence Kit. If the victim makes the decision to make a police report, that kit will be turned over to the police to be brought to the crime lab. And once an arrest occurs, that kit will be examined. And so it's a long process. The victim's going to be in the hospital for a while, 3-4 hours, and it's helpful to have someone supportive to be with them, explaining everything that's going on, answering their questions, and just giving them a chance to kind of release all their emotions.
So it's your staff offers emotional and legal advice, medical advice to get them through the very difficult
Yes.
process.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to talk about the volunteer program that
Sure.
your agency has?
Sure. We actually have 3 different volunteer programs. We have our court advocates. After they go through a short training program, they will be assigned to go to one of the courts in Albany County with another staff person. And first few times they go, they'll be observing, but after that they'll start seeing clients. And they'll be doing the same work that our paid staff do, providing information to the client, asking them, how has this crime affected you? What life changes have you had to make because of the crime? And then bringing that information to the district attorney so that this is not just another case for the district attorney, but this is a person who suffered consequences because of the crime. And that helps the district attorney decide how to handle the case.
And how many volunteers do you have now? And what do you is there a typical volunteer that you have in your program?
There really is no typical volunteer. People want to volunteer for all different kinds of reasons. Some of them are retired folks who are available during the day. Most courts meet during the day. There are some at night. But they are looking for something to do. We have law students from the Albany Law School who like to get involved with our program. Criminal justice majors from the various colleges here in Albany County are very interested in it. And it's just it's the kind of thing where you really feel immediate gratification. If you're working with somebody and you get them through that court process, it's so wonderful when they turn around and say thank you, and I couldn't have done this without you. So it's a very rewarding program.
I would assume you need somebody who's rather empathetic. I think my concern would be, if I thought about volunteering, would be that I would say the wrong thing. And could you talk about the training that people receive?
Sure. A lot of people are afraid they're going to say the wrong thing. But you know, there's really no wrong thing to say. As long as you're there, you're listening to them, you're providing them information, you're doing what you're supposed to do. I think that's why we have the volunteers shadow a staff person the first few times they go, so they can see just what are the right things to say. Okay. But the training covers our laws in New York State. We talk about the court system, the different steps in the court system, who all the players are, from the court clerk all the way through to the judge. The volunteers need to know who they'll be dealing with when they go to court. We cover information on the family court, on civil courts. Civil court would be if a victim decides they want to sue somebody because of the crime. We also cover information on domestic violence because a large percentage of the clients that we see in court are domestic violence clients, so everybody needs to be up on that. They know referrals, so if someone needs something that's beyond what we can offer, the volunteer will be able to refer the person to an appropriate service. And then we also cover paperwork, how to work with the Crime Victims Board, how to fill out all the paperwork so that once the victim's done with it, their part is ended, then we take over and get it all filed for them.
Okay. If someone was interested in volunteering, what could they expect in terms of the time they would need to be able to offer to your agency?
A lot of it will depend on which court they choose to go to. We usually, if they're going to go to, let's say, Albany Police Court, which happens to be the busiest court in Albany County, once a week, maybe 2 to 3 hours. Some people go every other week because once a week is a bit of a commitment. Mostly we cover the court Monday through Friday, but we're thinking about expanding it to Saturdays and Sundays because that court meets 7 days a week. Some of the other courts meet weekly. Some of the outlying smaller courts meet once a month or once every other week, once every third week. So it also depends on where the victim or where the volunteer lives, which one would be closer for them to get to.
Okay. Would you tell us a little bit what you can offer in terms of statistics, in terms of the need? At the beginning you talked about the crime going up. So is some of it perhaps just, is it the statistics you see from the police department and the legal system, or are you just busy, your agency, busier, maybe getting more calls? Because I know that rape is not always reported.
The number of calls we get from sexual assault victims is much higher than what the police statistics or what the national statistics say, for the reason you just mentioned. There are a lot of victims who still to this day choose not to make a police report, and they have their reasons for not making it. Going through the criminal justice process can be very difficult, particularly after you've been through such a trauma. And so some victims choose not to. For other victims, it's not even a question. Of course they're going to make a police report. It was a crime. And those are the figures that we would have that match the police departments. We see probably maybe 60 to 70 victims a year in the emergency room. I'm sure that there are many other victims that we don't know about, who don't use our services or choose not to go to an emergency room. They may perhaps go to their own doctor or just not go for medical attention at all.
So these are citizens of Albany County or people who have been victims in the geographic region of Albany County?
Yes.
All right, okay. So who can they contact if people are interested in the volunteer program?
If they're interested in working as a court advocate, they could either contact me at that administrative number.
That we'll give at the end.
Right. Or they can call Bernard Amador, who is the head of our Crime Victims Program, at the 5500 number.
Okay. And we will, at the end, we will also give your web address, your worldwide web address, so people can contact you that way.
Okay. Can we go back for a second?
Absolutely.
We talked about the court advocate program. I'd like to talk about the other two volunteer programs that
absolutely.
we have. We have volunteers who help staff our 24-hour hotline. It's a 24-hour hotline. For the most part, we answer it during the day when we're there. But we need volunteers to sort of take over the hotline starting at 5 o'clock in the evening, and they cover it until 7 o'clock the following morning. For people who are interested in working on a hotline, we need to have somebody who's a good listener, somebody who's very warm, very supporting, not quick to judge, able to give information in kind of a non-biased manner. The whole idea about recovering from the crime of rape is a victim has had the power taken away from her for that brief time that the assault was going on. By encouraging her to begin to make decisions and beginning to move forward, that is going to help in her recovery. So we know that we can't tell people what they should do. Instead, we can offer choices and encourage them to make a decision. And whatever decision they make, that's what we support. So I need somebody who's able to do that and not somebody who wants to rush in and say, oh, if I was you, I would do this.
Right.
So we're very selective about who works on our hotline.
And can I just interject here that when people call the hotline, that does not mean that they are calling the police.
That is correct.
Right.
That is correct. We do not call the police. That is up to the victim to do that. The same is true if the victim goes to the emergency room. The doctor or the nurse will not call the police unless the victim specifically asks to have the police called.
And I just want to offer one more question, comment. You were using the word, you were saying she, her. I assume this program is also for men.
Yes, I have a tendency to say she only because the larger numbers of victims that we see are women. I would say roughly 8 to 10% of our clientele, of our sexual assault clientele, are male.
Okay.
Obviously in our court advocate program, it's probably about 50-50. Okay.
Did you have another volunteer program you wanted to talk
Yes,
about?
in addition to the hotline, oh, and just to mention, the hotline volunteers are also available to go to the emergency room with victims. So not only are they taking phone calls, but occasionally they get called out. Okay. We also need people to help us work in the office. It's a busy office, as you can imagine. Our phones are ringing all the time. And we often put on special programs, special projects, educational programs, and we do need a lot of help with that.
And your office is in downtown Albany on State
Downtown,
Street?
112 State Street. It's the Albany County office building,
Okay.
directly across the street from the Crown Plaza Hotel.
Okay. Would you tell us a little bit about the funding for all these programs that you offer?
Albany County, of course, is our parent company, so that is where the bulk of our funding comes from. But we also have a grant from the New York State Department of Health. We have a grant from the New York State Crime Victims Board, and then occasionally we get some donations. The Crime Victims Board grant is, when we first got that in 1987, that's what allowed us to begin to expand our court advocate program to make us more comprehensive.
And that's New York State.
That's New
crime,
York State.
So it's a
Yes.
state level.
State level, some of the money comes from the federal, there's a Violence Against Women Act fund, and there's a Victims of Violent Crime fund. And the money gets channeled through either the New York State Crime Victims Board or the Department of Health.
Okay.
Okay?
Is the eligibility for Crime Victims Fund based on a person's income? Is that what the eligibility is? Is it a sliding scale?
To use our services?
Well, no, I guess I don't mean that. I mean, you help people if they need some, compensation for health insurance, or as you mentioned, piece like glasses or something like that.
There is not really an income level. They're not going to reimburse Donald Trump if he becomes a crime victim. But for most people, you do have to write down what your income was in the previous year, and what are your outstanding debts. But for the most part, they don't worry about that. Now, they are the payer of last resort, which means if you have insurance, you do need to use your insurance first, and then whatever insurance doesn't cover, the Crime Victims Board will pick up.
Okay.
And the nice thing about filing a crime victims application with the board, it's a lifetime policy. So if you experience medical problems due to the assault, and 10 years later you're still needing physical therapy or therapy, Crime Victims Board will pay for that.
Okay, that's great. Would you tell us a little bit about your experience, your background, how you came to be where you are now?
Okay. Well, I've been at the center 25 years. I just celebrated my 25th anniversary.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I was in the human services field. I was working for Planned Parenthood, and I loved my job there, but there was no variety, no chance for improvement, for moving up. A friend of mine was working at the Rape Crisis Program, as we were called back then, and called me one day and said, we have an opening. Are you interested? And I applied and got the job, and eventually I moved up to become deputy director. And what I really like about the job is every day is different. You meet new people all the time. There's always something different to do. You go to the emergency room, you take phone calls, you're writing grants, you're doing educational programs, you're making contacts with other agencies and letting them know about our services. And I'm also, in addition to being the deputy director, I am the volunteer coordinator. So I love that part of my job. I love working with volunteers. I love seeing their energy and their enthusiasm. I think it really keeps me going. It keeps me really excited about the job that I have.
So if you've had 25 years, what have you seen change? Is there, whether it's in the victims or in the government awareness or of the problems? I mean, what is the biggest thing, or if you had to pick a few things to talk about?
Well, one of the exciting things, I think, people are beginning to recognize that rape is a crime and it's okay to make a police report. When I first started working there, I'd say maybe 50% of people made police reports, and now it's closer to about 70–75%. So right there has been a big improvement. That's fantastic.
And I guess that means the culture, the larger picture is changing as well as in our, well, the culture is not approving of smoking, for instance, and they're finally addressing or recognizing that it's not the victim's fault. Right. So.
And I think once federal funding became available, and agencies could begin to grow, with legislation comes change.
Right.
And I think people in general began to see that if you're a crime victim, it's not a shameful thing. It's not something you have to hide. It's okay to talk about it. It's okay to seek help about it. Right. And so I think the numbers that we have, numbers of people that we see are staggering. We see over 1,000 clients a year, and it's growing every year. The number goes higher and higher.
Do you think that's because people are just becoming, because you're doing such a good job of promoting your services, or do you think the numbers are actually increasing of that?
That's a hard thing to know, because we don't know how much crime was there before that people just weren't talking about. One of the big things that has helped is having our advocates right in court, because as soon as someone has to enter into the criminal justice system, there's a person to help them. There's a person explaining what our services are. And then after they've experienced it, they talk to their friends and spread the word. And I think people are finding us through a lot of their friends who've used our services.
Well, I want to thank you very much for coming to be with us and sharing your agency's services and programs with our audience. And we will be having, as I mentioned, on our screen, your name, your phone numbers, and the web addresses as well. Is there anything you would like to offer at the end here, maybe a pitch for your volunteer program or something like that?
Well, if any of our listeners today have sort of caught the bug and would be interested in volunteering, we run volunteer trainings periodically. The Hotline Volunteer Program, usually we run 3 or 4 times a year. The Court Advocate Program, kind of on an as-needed basis. But contact me anytime, and I can get you signed up for one of the classes.
Okay. Thank you again, Debra.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for watching Getting to Know You.